Well, good morning everyone, and how are you doing? We have one for you today, boy. How you doing, Fernando?
Good, how are you?
Oh, yeah, rocking. So like I said, we have a good one. We have a great one for you today. We have a Mustang, that's right, and it's a newer Mustang. Let me show you what's got in it from the factory first. That'll help you wrap your head around what we're doing. So in each door we have a subwoofer, which is just like a 6-inch. We have a mid-range. Up in the dash we have a tweeter. We have a big touchscreen. And then of course in the back we have some rear speakers. What makes this system cool is that big touchscreen and those subwoofers in the door. This is a Ford Mustang premium audio system. It's called a shaker. Now what that means is that there's a factory amplifier in here. That doesn't mean there's a cool amp pro for it, because there isn't, but that's okay. And we're gonna get to that, because it's kind of exciting. Let me show you the factory amplifier. If you come down into the driver's footwell and you look up, there's your factory amplifier. There's 3 plugs attached to it, a black, a gray, and a tan. Just so happens to be these guys here. Before we get to talking about all the excitement involved with that, let's talk about now what's going in this car. Start out with, we're going with the cool Flax 3-way set. That's a mid-bass, mid-range, and tweeter. Big crossover. We're going with some Flax coaxials for the rear. We're going with this little workhorse of a battery. This is the SPP 680. This guy is tiny and it is tons of power, tons of power. They actually make an SPV 44. This is bigger, it's half the size. We're gonna do some roadkill. We're gonna sound deaden the heck out of it. Amplifier wise, we're going with AudioControl. We're gonna do the LC 1.800 and the D 4.800. The D means it has the DSP built into it. We're also gonna be doing 2 R-Type 10s and an enclosure in the trunk. We're gonna build a false floor to house everything up where the spare tire goes in this area here. And that's about it for the actual equipment. In my head I'm thinking, it's just a couple amplifiers and speakers. This one's gonna go, it's not gonna go quick. This one's gonna take a while. This is gonna be a big install. It's gonna be a lot of little tiny things that we're gonna have to do. One of them being getting to that amplifier. I like to eat my vegetables first because typically they're the most unenjoyable part of the meal. I like to get into the radio first. Anytime we're doing any form of integration, you have to do that first. You have to figure out how you're integrating your system into this car or the car you're working on. So let's head over to the kick panel and we're gonna start doing some investigation work there and figure out what we're working with. So to test this Mustang, we're gonna use a bunch of tools that we have to do this, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, you guys might not have all these tools. I understand. However, if you go back, we did a install Diaries on a Chevy Cruze Part 1. In that video, we showed you how to do the same exact thing we're doing, but we showed you how to do it with a variety of different tools, 9-volt batteries, cheaper ways to do it than what we're going to use here today. We're going to use a notebook where we've already added in some of the information that we need: make, model year, where the amplifier is located, how many plugs, the speaker layout. We have digital multimeter, we have a PT9A polarity tester, we have just a generic test speaker, tone generator, PAA3 RTA. The other thing that we're going to need is a cool set of test leads. These are just leads that we pulled out of previous plugs that we've worked on. They're real tiny because the holes on these 3 plugs that are here are super tiny. Speaking of the plugs, let's talk about them for a minute. On this amplifier, as we said, there's 3 plugs. There's a black, a gray, and a tan. If your plugs have tape all the way over them like these did, go ahead and remove those. Just be careful, don't cut the wires while you're removing the tape. When you're looking at the plugs, you're gonna see skinny wires like this one and fatter wires like this one. More than likely, the fatter wires are gonna be your speaker wires. Go ahead and disregard the skinny ones for right now. We'll get back to those. When you're doing something like this, always go for the easy, low-hanging fruit first. In this case, that would be the speakers. We wanna find all the speakers first because that'll eliminate a lot of the wiring here, because we need to get to other things that are gonna be harder to find. Digital multimeter, come into this harness. A lot of the times the speaker manufacturers will put twisted pairs into the plugs to help reduce noise, and it does make our jobs a little bit easier. In this case, the brown plug, we have 3 twisted pairs. You just don't want to tone those because they could also be data wires. Test those first with our digital multimeter. We'll set to continuity. It says 8 ohm. 8 ohms is a little high most of the time for cars, but it's not unheard of. Some are 16, some are 3.3, some are 2, some are 4. It can be all over the board. Let's test the other ones and see what they are. That'll give us a baseline. That one is 8, and that one is 8 as well. What we have is 3 8-ohm wires going across the top of this harness that are twisted together. That's a pretty good chance that it is a speaker. There's 2 devices we're going to use for this. We're going to use our tone generator, and then we're going to use our PT9A polarity tester. Make sure your tone generator's volume is turned all the way down when you start. Get your wires connected, and then turn it up slowly. That's definitely a speaker. Switch to our polarity tester. It's gonna make a popping sound that we'll be able to meter with our handheld polarity tester. You hear the tick?
Red.
That's red. Flip it. They both green. In this, the mid-range in the door and the tweeter and the dash are on the same channel. Make sure you polarity test both speakers if they're on a parallel channel like this, because sometimes they can be wired up backwards. And that's fine for the factory, but you may not want that in your application. In this case, our red wire here is going to a purple gray and a yellow gray. First wire that I mentioned is always going to be positive. The second wire I mentioned will always be negative. If I don't mention negative and positive, whatever I said first was positive. A lot of the times the car manufacturers will put things in order, meaning if this is positive, this is negative, and the next one will be positive, negative, and positive, negative. But don't take that for granted. It's not always the case, as you'll see in the cruise video. Go to our next one. All right, that's the center channel popping right now. In this case, we have a light green that is positive and a yellow gray. Test our last set here. Getting a green light. That means we have it correct. Come back over here. Light green blue and a gray blue. There is 3 other wires on this harness. 2 big fat ones and a skinny little one. Turn our digital multimeter to DC, which is the line with the dots beneath it. Probe those guys. My guess is they're power and ground, and that would be the case. There's a blue red that is power and a black gray that is ground. There is this 3rd guy right here, this little blue green. Let's see if that is possibly an accessory. Meter with the car off, we have nothing. Cycle the ignition on, and it's a 6-volt trigger. A lot of the times the Ford amplifiers do turn on with 6 volts. That's why in some of the older vehicles, if you have like a popping sound, if you just directly hook it up to the radio, that would be why. Done with the brown harness, move over to the gray harness. The wires on the brown harness, the top row was all the speakers. They didn't go up and down, they went across. Looking at the gray harness, it looks like it does the same thing. Start here, test the first set of wires on here and see what we're getting for an ohm load. This one is giving us a 4. Let's move it to the next one. Same thing. Let's go down below. Same thing. Same thing. So all 4 of them are giving us a 4 ohm load. Test with our tone generator. Remember, start with the volume low. Alright, so that's a speaker. Speaker, speaker, speaker. Found the 4 other speakers in the car, which are the door subwoofers and the rear speakers. Polarity test them. The PT9A just makes a tick, tick, tick sound. This guy right here reads it. We're ticking. Let's go meter the speaker. First one up is going to be the passenger rear. And what we're looking at here is a brown white is positive and a brown blue is negative. Let's move on to the next speaker. The passenger subwoofer, white purple and a white orange. The next pair is the driver's rear, white green and a brown yellow. Last speaker, be a white and a white brown. There's no other wires on the gray harness. We have these 2 harnesses all figured out. That leaves us this black harness here. Now the black harness is packed. It's a 16-pin harness and all 16 pins have something going on in them. When you cut the tape back, you find that there is a bundle of wires that are all grouped together. My guess is those are the signal wires. What we want to do now is test that theory. To test that, we are going to use our digital multimeter and our PAA3 RTA. Depending on what type of car you have, for example, let's say like a Chrysler, some Toyotas, and some of the newer Fords, the radio produces all the signal and it just feeds back into the amplifier. But it's not an amplifier in the sense that you're thinking. It's actually part of the radio. They've just separated it into 2 boxes. So coming out of the radio is a right and left fixed, non-variable signal. It doesn't move. I mean, it doesn't care what you're doing on the volume control. The signal stays flat all the way across. across, gets into the amplifier, and then the amplifier is talking to the radio via the bus of the car. As you turn up and down the volume then talks to the amplifier and tells the amplifier to go up and go down. And the amplifier is where all the fader control is built in. It's got obviously front, rear, left, right. It's all done in the amplifier digitally, just like it would in an aftermarket radio. It'd be done in the radio, because you have to think of them as one piece. Even though they're two pieces, internally they see each other as one piece. In some cases, there's also separate outputs for like backup sensors. There could be things like ANC or automatic noise canceling, and those are going to be done a lot of the times back at the amplifier. When you're testing, if you find a signal output and it's just flat and doesn't do anything with the volume, you have a non-variable voltage out. Now, a lot of those are what amp pros are built for. An amp pro has the ability to talk to the CAN bus in the car and go, oh, okay, I'm going to take that flat left and right output, put it into my little box. It also has the data wires going into it, do my balance and fader, do my volume control. That's why that works, because all it's doing is talking to the data bus in the car, just like the outboard amplifier would do. It's kind of cool. What we're hoping for is the opposite. We want variable voltage output, meaning that the volume knob on the radio is the volume knob on the radio. As you turn that up and down, the outputs of the radio that go into an amplifier move up and down, just like an aftermarket radio does. Volume up, volume down, boom, real simple. If it has that, we're awesome. We can go before the amplifier, because it's a variable voltage output, just like a normal aftermarket radio. We can put some RCAs on it. We're good. We want to test to see if this is variable. Now, if it's not variable, that means we have to go after the amplifier. Now, going after the amplifier in this case is going to be fun. We're going to have to do summing, because this speaker here and this speaker here and the tweeters in the dash, that's all front, and they're on 4 channels because you have left and right, 2 in each side. And we're going to need to bring those together, because the low that this is going to play is not enough to feed the new 6.5. It's not going to play down far enough, because these are going to be actively crossed over. We need to sum this with this. The amplifier we've picked for this has the capability to do that. It actually has front 4-channel input, so we can run the front tweeter in, we can run the front mid in, and we can sum the two together to get a 1 full range input. Hopefully we won't have to do that. We need the RTA so we can see what the signal looks like, but if you don't have one, you can still test variable voltage with the digital multimeter like we're going to show you. The other nice thing is, a lot of the times the EQing is done at the amplifier, not at the radio. That's kind of nice. When you sum, you don't get that fortunate. You have to de-EQ it, and it can get hectic.